WWE has so many events you can't possibly know every single thing about every single one. Luckily, you've got us to give you 100 things you didn't know about classic WWE shows. First up, the granddaddy of them all, WrestleMania.
Number 10, it wasn't always WrestleMania Sunday. This isn't as crazy nowadays as WrestleMania has grown to a 2-day event. It means for the foreseeable future this would just be the way. So far so good. I think WWE has handled this very well, and far better than I expected. The reason pro wrestling would always aim for Sunday, though, is because boxing had made Saturday its home, and when pay-per-view was first being established, Vince McMahon went properly nuts, and he put WrestleMania 2 on a Monday. Yep. Coming on the 7th of April 1986 and beamed from 3 different locations for reasons that will never make any sense, if we did it today, it would mean the broadcast would lead right into Raw. I'll be honest with you, I don't want to live in that world. It is highly doubtful we'll ever do this again. I just have the feeling the whole thing would totally bomb. Number 9, it almost had a better name. That's right. If you read the text version of this article on whatculture.com, you will get to this entry and see they have written a horrendous name. But nope, I won't have it. Because when Vince McMahon was trying to come up with something to call his wrestling extravaganza, ring announcer Howard Finkel suggested the greatest idea ever. Why don't we call it the Colossal Tussle? Heard that right. So straight away, just let your brain accept this. It would mean when wrestlers did something huge at the grandest stage, we'd have to say, what a colossal tussle moment. That barely makes any sense, and therefore we've all been robbed. I honestly think it would have hurt any potential success too, because even as a hardcore fan, I wouldn't know what this is. I mean, even WrestleMania is a bit weird, given that mania is defined as an excessive enthusiasm, but I suppose that is the deal. You'll buy tickets for the event based on the fact it's happening these days. Sounds kind of manic to me. Number 8, the Intercontinental belt's odd admissions. WrestleMania 3 will always be most fans' go-tos when it comes to treating the IC title correctly at WrestleMania. Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat had a match that was all kinds of great. Both guys were desperate to become the champion. That's all you need. They care, so I care. This is why when you zoom forward through time, there was a period where WWE just ignored this title for 6 Manias in a row. Yep, 6. Because after William Regal and RVD fought over it at 18, we didn't see it again until Mania 25 when Rey Mysterio took on JBL. Don't get me wrong, fans were annoyed about this. The powers that be just didn't seem to care. This didn't help that though, as this match only went 21 seconds because Bradshaw was severely injured, and it wouldn't be until Mania 28 when Cody Rhodes and The Big Show went at it that all of this felt like it'd been sorted out. If you were watching at the time, it shouldn't have been a huge shock, to be fair. Vince McMahon just didn't care about this belt for a while, to the point it even got retired later on. What on earth were we thinking? Number 7, Steel Cage fans had quite the wait. While the Hell in a Cell has been willed out for Mania ever since it debuted in 1997, the traditional Steel Cage was not as popular come the granddaddy of them all. That's weird. But in all the shows we've seen so far, the cage has only been busted out twice, once at that Monday pizzazz of WrestleMania 2, and then much more recently at WrestleMania 37. There it was Braun Strowman and Shane McMahon who had a fun enough match as Shane tried to kill himself as always. That's basically his gimmick now. It did mean there was a crazy 36-year wait between these, which seems strange for WWE, and I guess going forward this will continue. The rumors for Mania 39 were all about Finn Balor and Edge going back in the Hell in a Cell. I suppose the older brother had just been ousted in favor of the new favorite son. Number 6, Stone Cold never held official gold going in. And how mad is that? Stone Cold Steve Austin did storm into WrestleMania 12 for a brawl with Sammy Vega as the $1 Million champion. You know the deal with that thing. 1, the WWE never truly recognized it, and 2, wasn't even up for grabs here, so it doesn't count. After this, he did headline 3 events, but never came in as the champion, as he was the challenger at 14 against Michaels, 15 against The Rock, which was the same at 17. I mean, he won titles at all of them, but this was the secret sauce with the rattlesnake that WWE picked up on. Money was in the chase, especially if you blew the storyline off at WrestleMania. Given that Stone Cold, however, was one of the biggest drawing wrestlers ever, however, this is totally bonkers. I don't really understand how it happened in the first place. Number 5, Steve Austin's unique history. And carrying on with Austin, his Mania story is just wild. Because due to his success and the fact he did return in 2022 to have a main event with Kevin Owens, Stone Cold is now the only man to have headlined the pay-per-view in the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2020s. Obviously there's a gap for the 2010s because he wasn't around, but come on now, what a stat this is. It's hard to even imagine someone else coming close to this, although I suppose John Cena could, depending on what happens with his future. We all know he has a record when it comes to WrestleMania, but let's take a quick sidestep and compare this to Hulk Hogan. The Hulkster main evented so many of these shows, but he won't get anywhere near this. It just reminds you of the drawing power of the crazy bionic redneck. Number 4, 3 other performers have crossed 3 decades. So if we continue this on, who is in a close second place? Well, I'll tell you. The Undertaker headlined across 3 separate decades as he comes in at 1997, 2008, and 2010, whereas Shawn Michaels clocks in with 1998, 2004, 2007, and of course 2010. The Rock also sneaks in as he turned up at 1999, 2000, 2001, 2012, and 2013, so there's another reason he likely wants that final Roman Reigns match. Can get another one over Steve. As we know, that was on the cards for 39 as well, until the Great One schedule just wouldn't allow it. So you got to figure maybe, just maybe, the chances are low. I mean, is he going to be any freer next year? Nope. I think the ship may have sailed. Number 3, Triple H's surprising record. Current WWE head honcho Paul Levesque had worked an amazing 23 matches at WrestleMania. His first was a loss to the Ultimate Warrior in 1996, and from there, he lost an incredible 12 more times, so 13 in total. It's a terrible record. He also racked up 10 wins, but that still means he gets defeated more than he's victorious, which kind of flies in the face of this idea that the game refused to lose on the biggest stage. I mean, he was the first heel to be successful in a WrestleMania main event in 2000, but still, when he had to get his ass whooped, he did, kind of. Booker T match is still baffling. Given that it seems hugely unlikely he will ever return to the ring due to his health, this seems to be set in stone now, and to think it all began when the Ultimate Warrior shut down all of his ideas and told Hunter he was losing to his finish in less than a minute. Wrestling. Number 2, Daniel Bryan's rare faction feat. Here's a weird one. Daniel Bryan and The Undertaker share a WrestleMania history even though they never clashed on the big stage. We shall start with the Dead Man, because he has beaten every single member of Evolution on different shows. This came with Ric Flair at WrestleMania 18, Randy Orton at 21, Batista at 23, then he whooped Triple H a massive 3 times across these shows. When it comes to Bryan, though, he basically beat the remaining active members of the group in one night. Because we all know the deal at WrestleMania 30, Daniel got rid of Hunter and then defeated Randy Orton and Batista in the main event. It's still awesome. It also underlines how important he was in 2014, because this doesn't just happen. And while we did have to go all over the place to get here, at least when all was said and done, we got the satisfaction we needed. That is the point of wrestling, after all. Number 1, Seth Rollins is younger than WrestleMania. So why is this relevant? There's a lot of people who fit into this category, but with Seth Rollins, he has a certain record that no one can take away. He became the first main event winner to be born after the event itself was created. Yep. Happening at 31 when he cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase during an awesome twist. It all begins when Rollins was born in May 1986. This also means he actually popped into the world after the second Mania, and while Roman Reigns and Becky Lynch would join this list, they weren't first. Nobody can alter that. Also, what Seth did was just far cooler than the rest. Seeing Rollins leg it out during the Roman Reigns-Brock Lesnar match was a proper colossal tussle moment. And now we have definitely put that to bed, because no, it still doesn't work.
And up next, a top choice in France and Puerto Rico, it's Backlash.
Pretend the Hunter, Edge and Randy Orton show. So even though their win-losses ain't great at this show, it is Mr. Edge and Mr. Triple H who are basically Mr. Backlash, because when you go through every single one, these guys keep turning up. It's quite the opponents they have faced along the way too, because you've got The Rock, and you've got The Undertaker, and you've got Shawn Michaels, and you've got Hulk Hogan. But yeah, their records are 5-6 and 4-6, which means when they try to get a victory, they totally suck. They can get mad at each other too, because in 2006, it was Triple H versus Edge versus John Cena for the WWE title. And do you know who walked away with the W there? It was Jonathan Cena. Edge really ran this home too, because he fought Cena again in 2007 when Shawn Michaels and Randy Orton were also in the thing, and he did lose. And I think 12 months after that, the game must have taken notice, because he finally got a win when he was thrown in the ring with John Cena, Randy Orton and JBL. Thank goodness for that. Edge felt the need to one-up this when he finally defeated John Cena the next year on, whereas Triple H was in a crazy 6-man tag match with Randy Orton, and somehow the title still changed hands. Edge and Randy were back to this in 2020 when we did have the greatest match ever, and I kind of feel like we've talked about that enough. I mean, it came within the pandemic era, and to be honest, you can take all of that and go poof and flick it away. I never want to discuss it again. Number 9, the last In Your House. The last ever In Your House branded show before NXT brought it back was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And when you actually go and Google that, what the flub was WWE doing? Once WrestleMania was out the way though, we did dump all of this because we got Backlash and there was no In Your House, there was no nothing. It's because we wanted to present every single pay-per-view over a 12-month period as the biggest thing ever, so you better buy it. It's why the name today does still have some cachet because it's been around for ages. And once again, if you don't get this, just go back 20 or so years and look at the metrics. The wrestling industry was changing like crazy. You also start to get very cool looking unique sets, which WWE should bring back by the way, but you can't pretend otherwise. Vince McMahon just woke up one day and deleted In Your House. It was like they meant nothing to him at all. Number 8, the best Montreal repeat. So the Montreal screwjob is a little bit boring these days just because we've talked about it too much, but do not get it wrong. This should never have happened to Bret Hart, and it wasn't very nice. The wrestling business then took this angle and ran it into the ground, although actually, when you go to Backlash 2004, I think this was the best creative to come out of the back of it. So after we had decided to do a WrestleMania 20 World Heavyweight title rematch between Triple H, Chris Benoit and Shawn Michaels, because we were going to do it in Benoit's hometown, which was north of the border in Canada, somebody had an idea. Because as soon as Chris and Shawn got into it, the referee got bumped, because of course he did. This is when Benoit applied the crossface, and seeing that the official was down, he was like, oh, well, now I've got to go take care of this. When he got back into the ring though, do you know what the Heartbreak Kid did? He locked in the sharpshooter. And again, we were in Canada. You know how these fans feel about Shawn Michaels. They booed the shit out of him. He was also wearing similar tights from 1997, so he knew what he was doing. Jim Ross started to reference it on commentary, and when Earl Hebner, of all people, Earl Hebner came out to sort this out, do you know what Jerry Lawler quipped? Well, why doesn't he ring the bell? He's done it before. Now this didn't go anywhere and Benoit did retain his championship, but it was taking something that we had seen and just going wink wink nudge nudge instead of like ramming it down your throat. We probably should have left all this in 2004. Here's a spoiler. We didn't. Number 7, the sort of return. For some reason, WWE one day just shouted into the abyss, no more Backlash. It was then gone for 7 years, and all of a sudden in 2016 it just turned up again. By this point though, the world had changed massively, especially for WWE, so it didn't really have a set month, and it kind of just popped up all over the place. Because one was in May, one was in June, one was in September, and that last one was also responsible for the first ever SmackDown exclusive pay-per-views that would go on for ages, as well as Raw. Not gonna lie to you, I didn't like them at all. AJ Styles did beat Dean Ambrose on that card though, so actually there was something to take away from this, because it was the phenomenal one proving, oh yeah, I can be in the biggest wrestling company in the world, and I'm still ultimately gonna smash it. However, most of these backlashes did actually feel like an afterthought, which is actually how you could explain most premium live events. I mean, it's only the last 18 months where really they've started to feel special again. Number 6, the night of debuts. So I suppose in many ways these days it's become the Raw after WrestleMania, but when it came to seeing wrestlers have their first ever WWE matches, Backlash was the pay-per-view that was like, well, I'll do it. After Mojo Rawley had a surprise appearance on the SummerSlam kickoff show in 2016, he was teaming with his Hype Bros partner Zack Ryder to take on the Usos, and we had the likes of Just the Incredible Sean O'Haire and Umaga arrive in 2001, 2003, and 2006 respectively. There is far bigger fish to fry though, because Brock Lesnar had his first proper match in 2002 at Backlash against Jeff Hardy, where he essentially murdered him. Do you remember what happened a year after this? It was The Rock versus Bill Goldberg. The most offensive one also happened in 2006, and you remember this. It was the McMahons taking on Shawn Michaels and the Lord Almighty. Now there was probably a line we shouldn't have crossed here, but man did we cross it. Number 5, the McMahons and the referees. So in 1999, the McMahon family were falling apart. Shane McMahon didn't like Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon didn't like Shane McMahon, especially because Daddy McMahon was far more worried about his daughter Stephanie, who was being chased by The Undertaker. Don't worry about it. The Rock was still full on asshole, which is why he walked into this event trying to win back his WWE title, which he had lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania. Shane Owen made himself the special guest referee too, so you just knew that this was going to be Shenanigans Central. or chaos, absolute chaos. Because halfway through, Vince did return after being away for a while. He took out Shane McMahon. He had referee Earl Hebner with him, who went and helped Steve Austin retain his title. Good. Jump forward 12 months though, and the family was all buddies again, because they had welcomed Triple H into the fold, and everyone had decided we have to protect him at all costs. He was also battling with The Rock, who was now a good guy, and do you know who the special guest enforcers were? It was Pat Patterson, and it was Gerald Briscoe. So that's right, there was more nonsense. It was also a little weird because Steve Austin was also another one of these, because he was coming back from injury, and even though he didn't turn up until right at the end of the match, he taunt Triple H. When Linda McMahon was here, she pushed down Stephanie. She also had Earl Hebner with her. He got in the ring. All of a sudden, The Rock was the champion. Now, you can poo-poo this all you want, but go and listen to the response when Linda does push over her daughter. Everyone goes crazy. This is why we did it for so long. Now, before Hulk Hogan sets a record. So according to most reports, it was brand new WWE champion who got to Backlash 2002 and said, you know what? Put me in the ring with Hulk Hogan. We got to give the belt to him. It was kind of crazy because it had only been a month after Triple H had finally defeated Chris Jericho at WrestleMania after he had been out for ages with a quad tear. But you all remember Mania 18. That's when we had The Rock versus the Hulkster, and people lost their mind for the red and yellow. So I'm sure that Hunter knew eventually this title would find its way back to him anyway, which is why, a month after Backlash, Hulk Hogan lost to The Undertaker to begin with. It did set a record though, because given that Hulk did win the championship here, and he won his first championship in 1984, well, it was basically the longest time a male performer in WWE had in between title reigns. Now, can you do anything with that information? No. But I thought I'd tell you anyway. Number 3, Scotty's Big Night. Quite the underrated wrestler since he did find his way to massive popularity, Scott Garland likely should have got more opportunities than he did. Because honestly, if you get as over as he did, you kind of think some sort of title run was going to happen eventually. And it didn't really. It all kicked off in 1999 when his tag partner Brian Christopher got injured, and when they did return, they were Grandmaster Sexay, but because they were appearing in WWE, eventually Vince McMahon was like, now you're gonna be singles guys. It worked out really well for Hottie though, because he started to go after the WWE Light Heavyweight Championship, and if only McMahon had actually cared about this, all of it would have been beautiful. At Backlash 2000, he does indeed try to win this thing where he takes on Dean Malenko, and I tell you, while it's probably lessened now because of everything we've done in 2023, Scotty 2 Hottie is just flying around the ring like the ultimate babyface, whereas Dean is just Mr. Technical Wrestler. Really good. Malenko also reversed a superplex into a DDT from the top rope in order to get the win. And I just thought this needed to be shouted about more, because nobody talks about this. I went back and watched it, and it is fire. To farewell, Owen Hart. So this one is horrible, but we must talk about it because the memory and legacy of Owen Hart should always be shouted about. Otherwise, we're going to forget. But a month before his tragic death at 1999's Over the Edge pay-per-view, he was involved in a tag team match to determine who would be the brand new #1 contenders for Kane and X-Pac's championship. Kane and X-Pac were a weird team, although it was X-Pac who taught the Big Red Machine not to talk without his voice box. I don't know what was going on. They were facing the New Age Outlaws too, and of course, given the time, it was Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg who got the victory here. But just go and listen to any story that Owen Hart's tag team partner Jeff Jarrett tells. It was one of his favorite times in his career, just because he got to hang out with Owen. Sums it up. Number 1, money. That's right, money. The WWE was so successful in the year 2000 that when they got to WrestleMania, they just went flooded. No more singles matches, we're just gonna have a bunch of fun, we're gonna do a bunch of stipulations, and also, we're not gonna pay the story off here. We're going to wait a month. And I think most people would agree in hindsight this was an error because most individuals just wanted Triple H versus The Rock. But instead we threw the Big Show in there, we threw Mick Foley in there, and there was a McMahon in every corner. Sports entertainment. The thing is though, it worked because we did decide to hold off the Game versus the Great One until Backlash, and this show did 675,000 buys, which for a non-WrestleMania event was crazy. I mean, the Royal Rumble only did 590,000 buys. It's the Royal Rumble. The daring to stretch Mania out a few weeks was a massive success, and it made them a lot of money, which is why we see some of the things we're still seeing in 2023. Remember when we went to finish the story at WrestleMania 39? Well, there's a reason we did it, and you can go back over 2 decades ago and start figuring it out.
Now, here comes the biggest party of the summer, SummerSlam.
Number 10, the amount of people who have attended. So you can't argue it now, SummerSlam has become a beast. It sells out stadiums, and as of me talking, it's going to do around 50,000 tickets for the 2023 version. That's amazing. If we look at the previous 35 iterations between 1988 and 2002 though, do you want to know what we're up to? 735,997 people have gone to see it live. Wow. It's definitely going to increase like mad as WWE is simply going to be running bigger buildings, but even then, getting almost 1 million individuals to SummerSlam over the years is quite the stat. I think there may be something to this. The best part is we didn't include the 2020 premium live event, because why bother? Humans didn't exist then. Without that, would be even further ahead. Number 9, the original plan for 1988. Whether you want to believe it or not, plans change. Vince McMahon especially can never make up his mind, and this was true even way back during SummerSlam number 1. When all was said and done, we did get the Mega Powers versus Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase, which was pretty cool, but the Macho Man Randy Savage almost took on Ric Flair. Now today that doesn't sound so shocking, but at the time, the Nature Boy was absolutely wrapped up with the NWA, but as he had some struggles on that side of the fence, there were some conversations about making the jump, and at the last moment, Flair decided this was a bad idea and he didn't do it. Given that this would have meant Rick making his WWF debut in Madison Square Garden, it would have been quite the moment. And let's just put it into modern perspective. Imagine Roman Reigns went to AEW and arrived in Jacksonville for Double or Nothing. The internet is not ready for that. And it's never going to happen. Number 8, that 2004 dodgeball disaster that upset everyone. Do you want to know why women were done with WWE after a while? Because at the 2004 SummerSlam, they were booked to play a game of dodgeball. Can you imagine? It was between the Divas and the Diva Search contestants, which made it even more silly, and to wrap it up, it was a waste of time. It didn't serve anybody. Surprise, surprise, when all was said and done, people backstage weren't happy either, but not for the reasons you're expecting. Because the contracted employees lost to these reality show hopefuls, they got taken to Wrestler's Court, for goodness sake. And if you don't know, Wrestler's Court is where members of the roster make up ridiculous charges such as this, and then try people behind the scenes. And here, the feeling was this made the WWE look bad. Trust me, that ain't the reason. It's the fact that we chose to do this rather than, a wrestling match. The long and the short of it is that nobody cared about it because it was a game of dodgeball and we wanted to see some grappling on SummerSlam 2. The good news is I doubt they'd ever do this again. The backlash would be unreal. Number 7, Shane McMahon's 2000 safety speech. SummerSlam 2000 is a historic event for 3 reasons. You had the now famous TLC match, the horrible concussion Kurt Angle suffered in the main event which gets discussed constantly these days, and Shane McMahon. Yep, he gets a category all of his own. I'm sure you've seen it by now, and if not, Google it, but Shane-O climbs the side of the Titantron when opponent Steve Blackman follows him up there, smacks him with a kendo stick as McMahon falls for what feels like miles. It is as scary now as it was then. The real kicker though is that Shane subbed in for Daddy Vince when talking to Edge, Christian, the Dudleys and the Hardy Boys about being safe in their tables, ladders and chairs match. And then he went and did this. That's like telling your friends no alcohol and then you literally become a bottle of beer. I suppose this was orders from above with Shane being told he had to relay them, but it was so short-sighted. Even if McMahon hadn't have taken this fall, he'd already been mad for ages, you would still roll your eyes at this guy talking about being safe. I mean, he was a proven maniac. Number 6, Kurt Angle learns to bleed. Think of this. When Kurt Angle faced Stone Cold Steve Austin in the SummerSlam 2001 main event, he'd only been wrestling full-time for 2 years. Don't come in here and tell me he's not one of the best. He is. This did come with some issues though, especially with the dark side of wrestling and blading. So when it was time for Kurt to cut his head, he couldn't do it. There's nothing untoward here. It was just an experienced dude not really knowing what to do. Austin, who was a super veteran, soon realized, so he just grabbed the blade and did it himself, which Angle has chatted about on his podcast. The Rattlesnake was so panicked to get it done, he made Kurt bleed like a fountain. The Olympic gold medalist has also said this was like learning on the job because he never fell into this hole again. I bet he was happy with that too. Even after the match was done, the wound would not stop pouring the red stuff. I mean, that's a big whoops. Number 5, Edge's wild SummerSlam 2008 pitch. Today, Edge will be the first to admit that the risks he took forced his early retirement in 2011. His neck just couldn't take it. In 2008, he hadn't arrived at this conclusion, however, and when tasked with facing The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell, his brain instantly thought of 1998 and Mick Foley. As everybody did, I suppose. Because all wrestlers have to try and one-up each other, he found the dead man and actually pitched this idea. What if you tombstone me on top of the cell? Yep. Backstage officials instantly said no because a decade prior the roof had given way, almost killing mankind. And while the thing had been reinforced, if this happened again, forget about it, the rated R superstar would die. That bump is a killer, literally. Instead, we went kind of safe and Edge took a chokeslam off a ladder with the ring collapsing in on itself on impact. Never forget when WWE does this too, they state the recipient has been thrown into hell. There you go, hell is just the space under the squared circle. Who knew? Number 4, Hulk Hogan holds a unique record. So I don't think anybody is going to be able to top this. And why? Because Hulk Hogan went a ridiculous long time between SummerSlams. Watch. In 1991, he headlined the pay-per-view in what can only be described as an interesting match, and he didn't have another appearance in the summer event until 2005. That is a 14-year gap. Ridiculous. He main evented that one too, which was a nice tie-in. Why he didn't pop up in 2003 and 2004, I don't know. Well, it's likely because whatever was pitched didn't work for him, brother, but let's not worry about it. We all do recall this match too, because it was the infamous encounter where he took on Shawn Michaels. Given that Hogan pulled a fast one last minute and refused to do a rematch so he wouldn't have to lose, the Heartbreak Kid decided to oversell all of Hulk's offense. It was parts hilarious and part totally unprofessional, although let's be honest about it, Hulk Hogan did start it. And also, if you've never seen this, make sure you change that today. Number 3, Shawn Michaels' return was almost very different. 3 years prior to this too is when HBK made his comeback to WWE, and it rocked. Nobody thought Michaels was ever going to return following a back injury, and yet in 2002, him and best friend Triple H put on a classic. It is worth watching. When plans for the comeback were first put on the table though, this was very different. Weapons, bells and whistles would still be involved, but the opponent would be Vincent Kennedy McMahon. That's right. It was actually Vince himself who thought a match against the game would be far better all around, and he was correct. McMahon fights do have a certain beauty to them, but they're also train wrecks. Not something you want to do when a dude is coming back from retirement. The boss still liked the idea, so shelved it until WrestleMania 22 rolled around. And do you want to know why Shawn favored it originally? Because expectations would be so much lower, whereas against Triple H, he would have to bring it. Turned out there was nothing to worry about though. Did they both smash this? Number 2, an interesting WWE title stat. If we were to all sit down and discuss it, I think most people would agree the WWE title has been the top prize in wrestling for a while. I mean, they've been the biggest company for decades, so it stands to reason. If you win that thing, you've done pretty good. This is why the following stat is mad, because it has only headlined 4 SummerSlams of the last 15 events. So basically since 2008, this championship has only been defended last a handful of times. That's crazy. These were CM Punk versus John Cena in 2011, Daniel Bryan versus John Cena in 2013, Cena versus Brock Lesnar in 2014, and of course Roman Reigns versus Brock in 2022. That's it though, no more. Done. This is mostly because the newer Universal belt took over, and as Roman and Lesnar have also dominated the latter years with that championship, well, it all ties in. Some may say this underlines that we have too many titles these days. That's another video for another time. It's also correct. Number 1, it almost opened the forbidden door. Apparently. You always have to throw an apparently in there. But if we go to 2018, 1 year prior to AEW's first Double or Nothing pay-per-view, Chris Jericho went to WWE higher-ups with a pitch. As he was now the New Japan Intercontinental Champion, why doesn't he return to the company and challenge none other than Seth Rollins, who was the WWE Intercontinental Champion at the time? Let's face it, this would have ruled. It also would have been the perfect way to do it, because while an IWGP belt would be on a WWE show, this was Chris Jericho, a man who was synonymous with Vince McMahon's company. Naturally, Vince heard this and thought it was pointless and booked Dolph Ziggler versus Rollins instead, which was actually very good. But as for Chris, he wasn't even included. No wonder the All Elite Wrestling gig seems so appealing. If it had gone down, the Forbidden Door would have been opened before we even called it that. But here's the truth. I don't think it'll ever happen with WWE because they don't need it. As I've told you before, my mum calls wrestling that WWE stuff, so they've won, they're ahead, and they don't want to bring anybody else along with them. The end.
An evening where every title is supposed to be on the line, it's Night of Champions. Number 10, the conundrum of Cody Rhodes. So yes, Cody was the megastar I was referring to in the introduction there, because if you go up and look at Wikipedia or Cage Match or wherever you get your results from, and you go down to roughly the middle of the Night of Champions 2008 card, you'll see something curious. It'll tell you that in a WWE Tag Team Championship match, a team consisting of Ted DiBiase Jr. and Cody Rhodes defeated Hardcore Holly and Cody Rhodes in a sort of halfway title change. And for those of you who weren't exactly avid WWE viewers at the time, the younger viewers out there, I imagine, you might look at this match and go, what the hell happened here? But it's actually quite simple to explain. Ted DiBiase Jr. coming into the pay-per-view promised a mystery partner alongside whom he would go after Hardcore Holly and Cody Rhodes, who were the tag team champions at the time. That mystery partner turned out to be Cody. So even though it technically happened within the confines of the same match, with Cody jumping from one team to another, he technically ended his own reign to start a brand new reign, with Ted turning on his devious mentor Bob Holly, who was a bit of a prick to him throughout their run. It also kind of sowed the seeds for legacy later down the line as well, making this quite the conundrum indeed. Number 9, Double Duty Duo. Not counting Cody Rhodes in this one because the whole kerfuffle I've just described technically happened in one match, but there have actually only been 2 wrestlers in WWE history who have ever pulled double duty, wrestling twice on the same night at Night of Champions. One of them is Seth Rollins, and one of them is Curtis Axel. Axel had what was probably the best night of his main roster run in 2013. First of all, he defended his Intercontinental Championship against Kofi Kingston, and then later on, he technically beat CM Punk, albeit in a handicap match where Paul Heyman was his partner and Ryback interfered and he didn't score the pin or whatever. But still, technically, a win over CM Punk after a successful IC title defense. That's a pretty good night. And then 2 years later, Seth Rollins did it a bit more prestigiously. He did start with a defeat when he lost the United States Championship to John Cena, but since when is losing to John Cena any kind of great shame? Then later on, in the main event of the evening, he faced Sting in what would be Sting's final WWE match ever, which wasn't exactly any kind of in-ring classic, but still, it's a nice little thing to have on your resume. Retired Sting until he showed back up in AEW a few years later. Obviously, that's the in-character side of it. I got this scalp, blah blah blah, I beat Sting. Sting was very seriously injured in this match to the extent that we thought he was never going to work again. That meant when he did show up all those years later at Winter is Coming, it was pretty damn mind-blowing. But still, Seth got the better of him at Night of Champions 2015. Number 8, secondary title supremacy. WWE haven't always given their secondary championships the most importance over the past couple of decades, but interestingly, they kind of have at Night of Champions, because during the pay-per-view's initial run from 2008 to 2015, you knew every single year you were getting an Intercontinental title match, a US title match, and a tag team title match. And yes, this is technically part of the Night of Champions gimmicks, the whole every belt must be defended deal that they try to go with this show but don't always enforce. But at the same time, it was probably quite nice for those secondary champions who weren't by any means guaranteed to get on other pay-per-views, but when this one rolled around, they could get that nice little payday for sure. Number 7, 2023 will break an illustrious streak. So unless something major happens between now and the show airing, and I don't know if it will, Roman Reigns isn't actually defending his undisputed WWE Universal, whatever that belt's going to be called going forward. He's not defending it at Night of Champions 2023. Instead, it's going to be him and Solo Sikoa against Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens for those tag team titles. Another twist in the ongoing Bloodline saga as Roman and Solo try to outdo the Usos. The interesting thing about this is that the WWE Championship has been on the line on every other Night of Champions pay-per-view that has ever happened. Not here. The streak comes to an end. Roman Reigns will celebrate 1,000 days on top of WWE on the night, but the gold will not be on the line. Which of course clears the runway for the brand new World Heavyweight Championship, which will be contested when AJ Styles and Seth Rollins face off, probably in the main event. Number 6, 8 in a row, and then an 8-year gap. This is more of a cute piece of happenstance rather than something that WWE sat down and tried to manufacture, trying to weave into the lore of this show as a whole. But the original run of Night of Champions in this company took place from 2008 until 2015. That's 8 different incarnations before it was kind of done away with and Clash of Champions came back in 2016. And quite conveniently, quite coincidentally, probably, the gap between that last show in 2015 and 2023 is the exact same. Now, the show is back, we had the 8-year run, now we've had the 8-year gap, wonder if we'll get another 8 and then it'll go away for 8 more. Who the heck knows? It's just kind of interesting, okay? Leave me alone. Number 5, the only non-WWE title to ever be defended is the ECW World Championship. Now, of course, this was technically under WWE's umbrella. It was WWECW, as it was derivatively called back in the day. But that championship doesn't have the WWE prefix. It was a continuation of the old ECW title. So, in my warped view, it counts. In 2008, the ECW World title was on the line as Mark Henry won it in a match featuring Kane and The Big Show, which was kind of like a trial run to see how Mark would do as a top world champion in WWE with what was technically the 3rd biggest world title in the company at the time. Then, the following year, it was defended by Christian against an ECW original in Tommy Dreamer, keeping the ECW title's presence alive, and after that, like the brand, it kind of went away. Number 4, a perfect 10. Quick costume change for this one, but you don't need to worry about that. Anyway, did you know that up until this year's event, at Night of Champions, a total of 10 different titles have been on the line at this event? Well, if you didn't, you certainly do now. And we've got the usual mix of stuff in here. Your 2 top-level world championships in WWE, the WWE and World Heavyweight titles. You've got the Old Women's title. You've got the Divas title, the Intercontinental, the United States. We've got 2 separate versions of the Tag Team Championships. We've got the ECW title, as we've just mentioned. And number 10, the Cruiserweight Championship, which was on the 2007 Vengeance version of Night of Champions before it was discontinued later that year, hence why it wasn't on any other shows. So a perfect 10 titles defended on Night of Champions, but guess what? That's all going to change this coming Saturday, because for the very first time we're going to add the Raw Women's title to the lineup. We're going to add the SmackDown Women's title to the lineup as well, and these things of course did not exist when the show was originally going around. I suppose technically as well, you've also got the Undisputed Tag Team Championships, although the lineage of that is a little complicated, and it's the same for the World Heavyweight title. So I guess it depends how generous you're going to be. If you're feeling super generous, coming out of this weekend, 14 different titles defended across the history of this show. If you're feeling a little bit less generous, we're down to 12. Either way, perfect 10, not so perfect anymore, huh? Number 3, the ripple effect of 2011. If the Summer of Punk hadn't already come screeching to a halt by the time we reached this pay-per-view, then it definitely did here, as Triple H heinously defeated CM Punk at Night of Champions 2011. It's something that Punk never let go of, as he admitted during his incendiary appearance on the Art of Wrestling podcast after leaving WWE in 2014. Punk outlined just how angry the whole situation made him and went into detail about how WrestleMania 30 was eventually supposed to be some kind of make good where he'd tangle up with Triple H, but he knew better and he wanted better for himself, and that rematch didn't end up happening. In 2011, CM Punk had to wait all the way until November to get that definitive WWE Championship win, but he had never looked lower after coming from so high than when his shoulders were being pinned to the match by WWE's kayfabe COO. Number 2, why it's called Night of Champions. At one stage in his run, Vince McMahon was incredibly reluctant to make the most of WCW's legacy and fully utilize properties and pay-per-views and matches and everything else that had been established in Ted Turner's promotion. He was kind of allergic to it, in fact. The most cited example of this would be War Games, which Triple H was already very keen on bringing on in 2002, but when he presented it to his dopey father-in-law, the end result was Elimination Chamber, which always felt like something of a compromise. And perhaps this is why WWE felt they could never fully commit to the old TBS staple Clash of the Champions either. They kind of flirted with it with Vengeance 2007, which was subtitled Night of Champions, but instead of going with Clash of the Champions, which would be the closest WCW equivalent, Night of Champions became the pay-per-view thereafter from 2008 onwards until we got to 2016, when W did kind of go for Clash, but still had to put their little spin on it. Clash of the Champions? No. Clash of Champions? Yes. Vince McMahon used to be obsessed with this kind of stuff. He had to stamp his own identity on things that clearly came from another promotion. That being said, on the 26th of March 2001, maybe he was a little too preoccupied to focus on these kind of subtleties. And at number 1, WCW did it first. Perhaps to avoid confusion with the old Clash of the Champions label, WCW absolutely loaded the final episode ever of Nitro on the 26th of March 2001, subtitling it Night of Champions for a big blockbuster blow-off before Vince McMahon eventually swept in and bought the whole damn company in probably the worst day in American wrestling history. Honest. And on this Night of Champions special, every major WCW championship was up for grabs. We got the final Cruiserweight Tag Team Championship match. We got Shane Helms successfully defending his Cruiserweight Championship so that he could carry that into life as a newly minted WWE star. And of course, in the main event, we got Booker T emerging as a unified WCW United States and World Heavyweight Champion, becoming the centerpiece of the eventual invasion. This ultimately wasn't enough to convince USA Network officials that a WCW product would be viable on television after the WWE takeover, but it was still a fun night for a bunch of wrestlers who were probably quite frustrated by the way they'd been used during the last few years of WCW, which, I mean, you know what happened there. So, Night of Champions became a subtitle for WCW Nitro in 2001. In 2007, it became a subtitle for WWE Vengeance. In 2008, it became its own pay-per-view. In 2015, it kind of went away again. And now we're here in 2023. And it's back. WWE's third ever pay-per-view after WrestleMania and the Wrestling Classic, it's Survivor Series with Gareth Morgan.
Number 10, it's the only Big Four PLE to be non-stadium. The Royal Rumble, WrestleMania and SummerSlam have all gone dome or stadium crazy in recent years. Granted, Mania has been a stadium staple for a long time now, and the Slam did rock the old Wembley Stadium back in 1992, didn't it? Then there's poor old Survivor Series. It's the only existing traditional PLE not to scale up. Anyone hoping WWE would plonk 2022's version in a stadium would have been disappointed to see it emanate from the TD Garden in Boston. And the same could be said of the latest inside of the All-State Arena in Chicago. They're both cracking venues, but Triple H needs to complete the set at some point. Perhaps a stadium wouldn't feel right for War Games, being totally fair. UK fans would tell you though that WWE could book a Stadium Survivors on British soil easily. They're probably right too. Fans on this side of the water demand bigger events, damn it. Especially after John Cena's Money in the Bank tease about WrestleMania. So will the series ever land in a major stadium? Well, it remains to be seen. And something else remains to be seen, your answer to this question. What is your favorite stadium show of all time in wrestling? Let me know down below, baby. Number 9, how Survivor Series boosted WrestleMania. Vince McMahon was in no mood to mess around when it came to protecting his larger-than-life WWF properties in the 1980s. Expansion was on McMahon's mind, which is why he told cable companies who aired the NWA's Starrcade 1987, which was going head-to-head with the first Survivor Series, that they wouldn't be allowed to show Mania 4. Naturally, a lot of them ignored the NWA show in favor of the WWF's guaranteed blockbuster that following spring. Basically, Survivor Series was used as leverage to boost Mania's value. It was a genius move from Vince, one that totally neutered Starrcade and directly chomped into the competition's business. The first series show in 87 was a unique enough concept to sell, but McMahon didn't want to joust for pay-per-view dollars with anyone, so he muscled the NWA out of the way by warning cable providers Mania hinged on their decision-making. It was WWF or bust as far as Vince was concerned. Number 8, WWE has booked just one big rematch. Browse through WrestleMania history and you'll see several big-time rematches litter the cards. Triple H versus The Undertaker happened 3 times, for example. The same could be said for The Rock versus Steve Austin. Hell, even Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns has repeated multiple times. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, though, had Survivor Series all to themselves. They headlined in both 1992 and 1997. The latter was a quiet match with absolutely zero fallout. Hardly anybody talks about it today. No other pairing has repeated that main event trick since. At one point, AJ Styles versus Brock Lesnar was in the running to do so on the undercard in 2018. But Daniel Bryan eventually replaced AJ, didn't he? Survivor Series Series isn't really the home of epic rematches then. That trend continued into the modern era when WWE started booking champion versus champion exhibitions, and the usual brand warfare stuff between Raw and SmackDown. And they do not count because they feature different lineups every single time. Number 7, the 90s only had 3 women's matches. Yeah, women's wrestling wasn't exactly an ongoing concern for the WWF back in the 1980s and 90s. In fact, only 3 female matches featured on Survivor Series cards during the entire decade of the 90s. Before that, the Fed had produced exactly 1 women's match on the original pay-per-view in 1987. Women would have to wait until 1995 for another spot on the card. There, Vince McMahon agreed to put on a Japanese wrestling showcase. 3 years later, Sable vs. Jacqueline went just 3 minutes for the women's title in 1998. 12 months after that, an 8-woman tag was handed less than 2 minutes of ring time. How wonderful. Chyna did wrestle Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental title and won in 99 at least, but the promotion simply wasn't that interested in the female graps until approximately 15 to 16 years later. Women's wrestling wouldn't be taken seriously at Survivor Series for a long time. The current crew make up for lost time, of course, because they're ace, aren't they? Number 6, Die Rocky Die. Did you know Survivor Series 1997 marked the final time the WWF referred to The Rock as Rocky Maivia? That name was taken out of the company lexicon immediately afterwards, and The Rock was firmly in from then on. Announcers did slip up and call him Maivia once or twice, but Rocky was more common as a nickname. It's also worth noting that The Rock initially badmouthed commentators / interviewers who continued to call him Rocky on TV. That was short-lived though. Maivia definitely wasn't what creative wanted to call Rock following the 9th of November 97, and they didn't want people thinking about it. If anything, Rocky became an affectionate, albeit occasional nickname uttered by Jim Ross. That was about it really. The WWE went full steam ahead on The Rock following his Nation of Domination team's loss to Ken Shamrock, Ahmed Johnson, and LOD in 1997. Memories of fan rebellion and those nasty Die Rocky Die chants faded. Number 5, it birthed the iconic Scratch logo. Give 99.9% of wrestling fans some paper and a pen, ask them to scribble out a WWE logo, and there's a fair chance you'll get the Scratch version. It's iconic and will always be the definitive logo to some folks. And that Scratch look debuted for the very first time at Survivor Series. The WWF aired a video hyping Attitude shortly before the main event between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. A drawn-out humdrum affair during which nothing of note actually happened. Okay, enough of that joke. The traditional block New Generation motif was used as a watermark on the actual event though. But not for long. One vignette changed everything. The WWF embraced their spirited new look, and the block style was firmly yesterday's news. Scratch would hold up until WWE remodeled the logo into something else modern in 2014. Select portions of the wrestling community still aren't over that one though, but the logo you love was first spotted at Survivors. Number 4, 1991's secret backstage tension. It was shocked looks all round when The Undertaker beat Hulk Hogan to win the WWF title at Survivor Series 1991, but the real drama came backstage. There, Hulk claimed Taker's tombstone piledriver jammed up his neck because he landed on his head. Taker saw the clip back and realized Hogan's head came nowhere near the canvas though. In other words, and you might want to sit down before you hear this next bit, old Hulk was talking nonsense. That didn't sit well with the dead man at all. Taker told ESPN in 2020 that he viewed Hogan differently after that. The comparative rookie knew insinuations that he'd injured the Golden Goose could have knackered The Undertaker's career before it properly got started. Watch 1991's title match back today, and you'll see that Hogan was definitely telling porkies that night. Christ knows why or what he planned to gain from it, but Taker was having none of this red and yellow nonsense anyway. Number 3, 1993's unique piece of history. Vince McMahon wasn't exactly accommodating to the wider pro wrestling universe during his pomp. His outlook was fairly simple. WWF/WWE was king, and it was better to pretend that no other promotion existed. The NWA? Puh. WCW? Double puh. ECW? Well, we'll give you funds on the down low, but still puh. That's why it's so incredible that McMahon agreed to greenlight a Smoky Mountain Wrestling tag team title match on one of his own pay-per-views. Jim Cornette somehow wangled a deal that saw the Heavenly Bodies defeat the Rock and Roll Express to win those belts at Survivor Series 1993. It was totally unprecedented. That marked the first and only time an existing championship from a functioning promotion outside the WWF/WWE was defended on one of those shows. WCW and ECW belts have been promoted, of course, but they were WWE property by the time that happened. What a strange one-off, eh? Number 2, the longest elimination elimination match ever. Lengthy elimination matches were once the law at Survivor Series. For example, a huge 10-on-10 tag bout from 1998 went 42 minutes and 12 seconds. The year prior, a similar setup lasted 37 minutes. Later, a traditional match in 1995 lasted 27 minutes and 24 seconds. But all of them stand in awe of 2016's Team Raw versus Team SmackDown shift. Ready? Right, good. That brand warfare battle lasted 52 minutes and 55 seconds, thus making it the longest elimination match in Survivor Series history by a considerable margin. The workers, AJ Styles, Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose, Randy Orton, and Shane McMahon were on the SmackDown side, and Braun Strowman, Chris Jericho, Kevin Owens, Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins made up Team Raw. Even answer to a WWE trivia question about Chin's James Ellsworth stopped by to make a cameo during the brawl. It was some set piece, and is best remembered for Shane almost braining himself during a spear spot with Reigns. These dudes went close to an hour, damn it. Number 1, fan petitioning Save Survivor Series. What do you remember about the 2009 Survivor Series? That memorable army themed poster with DX, Shawn Michaels and Triple H working a three-way with John Cena in the main event. Vince McMahon recalls it being an outright disaster of a pay-per-view. So much so that he planned to ditch Survivor Series as a whole in 2010. But then fans stepped in to stop that. Some even put together an online petition to protect the traditional event. Due to their efforts, survivors, well, survived. But it didn't look likely for a spell. McMahon even told investors during a conference call that Series was no longer advantageous, as a consumer now looks at what they are actually buying. Yep, those were his words. To be fair to fans, booking bragging rights in 2009, 1 month before Survivor Series, was a stupid move. It had a similar concept, and that instantly diluted what people enjoyed about Survivors. But Vince just did not get his way in the end. He ultimately reconsidered, and the series stuck around, baby. You'll love to see it.
Did you know the P in Pollard stands for payback? You sure do now. Here he is.
Number 10. The reason for Payback's initial cancellation. Yes, Payback was reintroduced in 2020, but why was the event removed from the WWE calendar in the first place? The answer comes down to the ever-fluid topic of WWE's brand split. Running as a regular pay-per-view from 2013 until 2016, 2017 saw Payback become a Raw exclusive event. Of course, the Superstar shakeup meant that this Raw event did feature SmackDown talent, but hey, that's forever the case when something involves WWE and a brand split. The 2018 Payback was intended to be a SmackDown-only pay-per-view, until a change of strategy saw those plans scuppered. That change of strategy was to move away from brand-exclusive pay-per-views, which in turn meant less pay-per-views were needed by WWE. Payback was one of the events to get the axe. Number 9. Payback 2014 broke a near 8-year streak. Payback 2014 has the accolade of being the first WWE pay-per-view to not feature a men's world title match for nearly 8 years. Prior to that Payback, the last time the top prize or prizes of the men's division wasn't defended on pay-per-view was back at Armageddon 2006. Where WWE Champion John Cena teamed with World Heavyweight Champion Batista to take on King Booker and Fit Finlay in a match where neither world title were on the line. For the next 7.5 years, at least one of the company's men's world titles would be defended whenever each pay-per-view rolled around. That was, of course, until Payback 2014 brought a halt to that streak. The WWE title and World Heavyweight Championship had been unified as the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, the trinket that Daniel Bryan would defeat Randy Orton and Batista for at WrestleMania 30. Unfortunately, Bryan was out of action due to neck issues by the time of Payback 2014, which is why the WWE World Heavyweight title wasn't defended at that event. Sadly, the Bryan would vacate his gold just 8 days after a Payback, which was headlined by The Shield versus Evolution. Number 8. Keith Lee's only singles WWE PLE win. Having received nods of approval from both Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar during his initial appearances on the main roster, big things appeared to be in the future for Keith Lee once he moved from NXT to Raw after SummerSlam 2020. Sadly, a mixture of Vince McMahon and some extremely serious health issues with Big Keith meant his spell on the main roster was a forgettable one. Discounting his time in NXT, Payback 2020 was as good as it got for Limitless's WWE run, as that Payback Payback saw Lee score his one and only singles win on a WWE Premium Live event, which came over 14-time world champion Randy Orton. Keith would be on Raw's winning team at the Survivor Series that November, but Payback stands as the former NXT champion's sole one-on-one PLE win from his time on the main roster. Considering how many expected to see Keith Lee as a major player on WWE Premium Live events for years to come, it's somewhat remarkable to reflect back on the role that Payback now has in Keith Lee's history. Number 7. Mr. Payback. Shawn Michaels is of course known as Mr. WrestleMania, and Bret Hart, Brock Lesnar and Edge are just some of those in the conversation when looking for a Mr. SummerSlam. If there were to be a Mr. Payback though, that man would be Seth Rollins. Roman Reigns has the most appearances at Payback, competing 6 times, but Rollins has a better record where this event is concerned. Of Roman's 6 outings, he currently stands at 4 for 2. For Seth Rollins, he and Reigns retained the WWE Tag Team titles against Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton in 2013, the Shield as a full trio defeated Evolution in the main event of Payback 2014, the Architect would successfully defend his World Heavyweight title against Orton, Reigns and Dean Ambrose in 2015, there was a Rollins win over Samoa Joe in 2017, and Seth's only loss at Payback came in 2020 when he and Buddy Murphy were beaten by the Mysterios. As for Mrs. Payback, there sadly really isn't one, as the only female to compete more than once is Bayley, and she's lost both of her Payback matches. Number 6. Randy Orton's awful Payback record. Orton is tied for second place with Rollins when it comes to the most appearances at Payback, but the Viper remains winless in all 5 of his Payback matches. As mentioned, Payback 2020 saw Randall Keith lose to Keith Lee. Prior to that, 2017 was a loss to Bray Wyatt in the House of Horrors. 2016 had Randy Orton come up short in a 4-way match for Seth Rollins' World Heavyweight title. 2014 had Randy part of that Evolution that lost to the Shield, and 2013 had Orton unsuccessfully team with Daniel Bryan against the Shield, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. Yeah, Payback's not great for Randy. Number 5. Less than 1 hour of women's wrestling. Of the 6 Paybacks so far, the women's matches of these events total less than 1 hour. To be specific, WWE's ladies have wrestled for 57 minutes and 21 seconds cumulatively in the history of Payback. AJ Lee defeating Caitlyn for the Divas title at Payback 2013, Paige retaining that same title against Alicia Fox in 2014, and Naomi and Tamina beating the Bella Twins in 2015. All of those matches clocked in at under 10 minutes. Alexa Bliss defending the Raw Women's title against Bayley in 2017, and Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax beating Bayley and Sasha Banks for the women's tag titles in 2020. Those matches would just nudge over that 10-minute mark, and the longest women's match in Payback history happened in 2016. That 2016 event saw WWE Women's Champion Charlotte Flair take on Natalya in a bout which ran for 13 minutes and 4 seconds. And for those wondering, the shortest Payback women's match was that Paige and Alicia Fox match, with the Anti-Diva tapping out Foxy after just 6 minutes and 37 seconds. Less than 1 hour across 6 events, that's pretty darn horrendous. Number 4, the Ryback connection. To steal a line from Randy Savage, Ryback very much had a cup of coffee in the big time, oh yeah. Dreadful impression, I know. But upon the former Skip Sheffield returning from injury in April 2012 with his new Ryback mantle, the powerhouse went on a tear through the roster. While that initial rise saw Ryback come up short against then WWE champion CM Punk, a heel turn post WrestleMania 29 put the big guy up against John Cena, who by that point was once again WWE champ. At the first ever Payback in 2013, Ryback was a major player, main evented against Cena for the WWE title in a 3 Stages of Hell match, headlining the pay-per-view against the biggest star in the modern era. It doesn't get much bigger than that. Skip ahead just 3 years and Payback would again be noteworthy for Ryback, but this time for being his final appearance with WWE. Losing to Kalisto on the event's pre-show, Ryback and his pre-show stopper trunk soon departed the WWE due to a pay dispute. From the Payback main event to the Payback pre-show is quite a journey in just 3 years. Number 3, the Hitman's last ever sharpshooter. Payback 2016 has the honor of playing host to Bret Hart's final ever sharpshooter. Despite being forced to retire in 2000, there were still occasional moments where Bret got physical, such as putting the sharpshooter on Damien Sandow on a 2014 episode of WWE Main Event. As it stands though, the final ever sharpshooter of Bret Hart's career belongs to Payback 2016, where the WWE Hall of Famer was in the corner of his niece Natalya as she challenged Charlotte Flair for the WWE Women's title. With Flair having her father in the corner, the excellent methods of execution was there to neutralize the Nature Boy. Natalya would get screwed on that night, but at least post-match she and Bret Hart got to lock in simultaneous sharpshooters. And what a sight it was. Number 2, the final WWE match for Cody Rhodes. At that 2014 event, Cody and Goldust came up short against Ryback and Curtis Axel. Left rocked by this loss, Cody followed the Owen Hart mantra of enough is enough and it's time for a change. Only that change initially involved Cody putting Sin Cara and then R-Truth with Goldust. With those partnerships not working out, Cody then debuted his face-painted, bodysuit-wearing, eccentric persona of Stardust. We'd had the Legacy Cody, we'd had dashing and undashing versions of Cody, we'd had the Rhodes Scholars Cody, and Payback 2014 had seen the final match for the Cody Rhodes name. The promotion was obviously extremely eager to welcome him back to the fold as Cody Rhodes upon the American Nightmare's return to WWE last year. Number 1, the truth behind the House of Horrors. While Payback 2017 took place from San Jose, California's SAP Center, one match started away from that arena. Yes, that would be the House of Horrors match between the late Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton. At the time, this House of Horrors was depicted, based on the time it took the competitors to return to the arena, as being approximately a 30-minute drive from the SAP Center. In reality, the drive from the Payback venue to Wyatt's creepy old house would have been closer to 30 hours rather than 30 minutes. As picked up on at the time by Sports Illustrated, the House of Horrors itself was located at 39115 Business 10 Highway, Richmond, Missouri. Not just that, but the property was also listed for sale at the time of Payback 2017, with a house available for the fairly modest sum of $36,000. Sure, the house and its outbuildings needed a bit of work, but $36,000 seems like a steal for someone wanting to make memories in the one and the same place where Randy Orton had a refrigerator dropped on him.
And now Simon Miller tags back in to tell you what's really in the Money in the Bank briefcase. It's a contract, but here we go anyway.
It wasn't the most successful gimmick pay-per-view. So in terms of gimmick pay-per-views, premium live events that are still around, Money in the Bank is one of the last ones standing because Hell in the Cell is gone, Fatal 4-Way is gone, TLC is gone, and Breaking Point is gone. Don't forget, at one time or another, Vince McMahon saw Breaking Point as his submission pay-per-view before he went, I don't really like submission matches. We just got rid of it. There is the Elimination Chamber as well, but that's still ongoing, so we'll put that to one side. And no, we're not going to include the Royal Rumble. That has reached a brand new mountaintop, and nothing is ever going to be able to top it, except for WrestleMania. The thing is, though, if we do jump in a time machine and go back to a day when pay-per-view buy rates were the thing, even though we all love Money in the Bank and it is still standing, thanks Elton John, actually wasn't one of the more successful ones. Because from 2009 to 2013, when WWE were absolutely obsessed with these, Hell in a Cell did 300,000 buys, 210,000 buys, 180,000 buys, 199,000 buys, and 200,000 buys. The Briefcase event in comparison though, from 2010 to 2013, did 162,000 buys, 195,000 buys, 188,000 buys, and 199,000 buys. You can't argue with that, it's maths. In fact, the only time it actually outdrew its anger and more brutal brother was in 2011, and we all remember what happened in 2011. It was CM Punk versus John Cena, when Punk went, ha, I've won the WWE title. Goodbye. Although with that said, number 9, Money in the Bank 2013, actually outdrew that show. Ruh-roh. I mean, fair play all around. Now let's not take away what CM Punk did back in the summer of Punk, because it was a brilliant storyline that made you go, well, I know most wrestling is fake, but when it comes to this narrative, I'm not 100% sure. That's good booking. As already mentioned, 195,000 people bought this pay-per-view, but when you got to 2013, that number jumped up to 199. Now this could be because by that point everyone was like, oh man, I love the Money in the Bank. Or it could be down to Mark Henry. That's right. Because this was the period where he did come out in his salmon jacket. It was all like, oh man, I'm going to have to retire, before he absolutely spanked John Cena. Shouldn't use the word spanked, it never works. So maybe that feud actually captivated people. I mean, we still do talk about it today. Mark's run as champion around this time was also like, hey man, you're doing good work, and it just goes to show. Mark Henry had all the insults thrown at him to begin with, but he found his place, and he became a damn good pro wrestler. Number 8, Cody Rhodes was meant to win it twice, and we wonder why he got annoyed and left. And we are of course talking about Cody's first run in WWE, which is also when Vince McMahon said to him, hey Rhodes, come here. We're gonna let you drop the Stardust gimmick. And he turned around and went, nope, we're not. I changed my mind. You're going to be Stardust forever. Great. So this was the same in 2011 too, when the future American Nightmare was told, oh, hey, you're going to win Money in the Bank, where once again plans changed. Why? Who knows? Cody actually even told this to premier wrestling journalist Alex McCarthy. Do you know what happened 12 months later? That's right, it happened again. This one too wasn't changed until the day of the damn show. And can you imagine that? You'd be going into the building, you'd be so damn excited, don't know what this is, be like, oh my gosh, I'm about to become Mr. Briefcase. Then it gets stolen away from you, and you feel all sad in your tum-tum. Number 7, Dave Meltzer isn't biased. So there go the comments. Lovely to see you. But the ongoing narrative, especially in 2023, is that Dave Meltzer loves AEW and he hates WWE. Now, I listen to the Wrestling Observer Radio podcast thingamajig, and I don't think this is true at all. Maybe a little bit with New Japan, but that's okay. You are allowed to have your favorites. The point is, if we do go through every single Money in the Bank ladder match that WWE has ever done and taken the star ratings, which always cause controversy, Big Dave has always been very kind about it. Because the 2021 entry got 4 3/4 stars, 2019 got 4.5 stars, 2018 got 4.25 stars, 2017 got 4.5 stars, and 2016 got another 4.5 stars. Do not forget, this is from a dude who often talks about ladder matches and says, oh, it's not really my type of thing. And even if we go back to the year 2015, it still got 3.5 stars. And in fact, the lowest it ever got was 3.25 stars. Now look, I totally understand. Star ratings are just an opinion. It's not the be all and end all. But I mostly wanted to throw this in there because the internet will go mad. But also, it's true. A fact is a fact. And this is a fact. Number 6, Jeff Hardy was also meant to win Money in the Bank, which does make sense. I mean, it's Jeff Hardy. We go back to WrestleMania 24 with this one, when it was actually CM Punk who grabbed the briefcase. Don't forget, around this period is when all of a sudden you could win Money in the Bank, but you still weren't presented as a top guy. It was weird. It was mostly because by 2008, the World Heavyweight Championship wasn't really a main event title, and instead WWE was putting it on guys that otherwise may never have won the thing. So actually, there was a benefit to this. I suppose it's an argument to be had. According to Matt Hardy, though, when this match did go down, originally, do you know who was in the winner spot? I mean, you do, because I've already told you, but it was Jeff Hardy. Speaking on his podcast, Matthew said the only reason this didn't go down is because of Jeff's personal issues. And if you go listen to Freddie Prinze Jr.'s wrestling podcast, he also talks about how he was tasked around this period with turning Jeff Hardy into a superstar. So there you go. But it is the easiest way to do this because the briefcase gives you power. Very sadly, we all know some of the things that Jeff did go through, so I just hope he's happy and healthy now. Because as good as wrestling is, it is the most important of the least important things. Number 5, Mustafa Ali was going to win it too. But plans change, pal. A lot. It's also a really sad story, because don't forget this kind of thing did happen with Mustafa Ali a lot. I mean, he was meant to go on to WrestleMania to fight Daniel Bryan, then he suffered a concussion, which is when Kofi Mania was born. You really never know what you're gonna get. In 2019, he was also meant to win the Money in the Bank briefcase, because Mustafa once again sat down with Premier Wrestling journalist Alex McCarthy, and he told him, and amazingly, he only learned this wouldn't be happening when he was walking to the ring. And nobody told him who was going to be victorious. They just said, something's going to happen. I mean, how does anybody deal with that? His anxiety must have been through the roof. As we now know, it's because Vince McMahon had decided to send Brock Lesnar out there to win the damn thing. And look, I would have loved it if Mustafa Ali had gotten this, but it did give us Boombox Brock. Kind of hard to choose between the two. Number 4, the dropping success rate. There was a time that if you did get this briefcase, you were probably guaranteed to become a world champion. And then one day, Damien Sandow lost his opportunity, and it was like, hot damn, we did it. It was odd because the likes of Edge, CM Punk, and Rob Van Dam had benefited from this massively. So you think WWE would have gone, well, we're on to gold here, friends. Maybe we should just keep it going. And we kind of did that, but as we've already touched upon, we also kind of walked down a different path. Because all of a sudden we were almost treating it as a second tier thing. Because even when Daniel Bryan won it in 2011, once again, was he presented as the top guy? The answer is no. In that same year as well is when we had Alberto Del Rio cash in. The less said about that one, the better. Even when Dolph Ziggler had his amazing moment with it in 2012, he was still never pushed as a tippy-top main eventer. This is one of the reasons eventually some people did sour on it. It didn't feel like the tool that it used to be. And of course, there's still been loads of highlights, like when Big E won the thing and became the world champion. But we all remember that reign. WWE didn't do right by him at all. I still want the company to have more fun with this though, even if it means wrestlers going after secondary titles. And that makes everyone go, no, we don't want that. But it comes down to the story. Like if Sheamus became Mr. Money in the Bank, it was like, I'm going after the Intercontinental Championship because I've wanted this for years, we will go, well, that makes sense. That's all you need in wrestling. I mean, it's on every flipping week. Do whatever you want. Number 3, this incredible stat. Have you ever felt like the Money in the Bank winners cash in on the same night a lot? Well, you're not crazy. You're just seeing it with your eyes. And this is very true with the women's version, because amazingly, it is only Carmella that ever had a lengthy reign with the thing. Which begs the question, what the hell are WWE doing? Because this was in her grasp for 287 days before she did cash it in to beat Charlotte Flair. But everybody else is totally impatient, and as soon as they get hold of it, it's like, man, I must cash in now. I mean, when Alexa Bliss won it in 2018, she went and used it almost instantly against Nia Jax. And then 1 year later, Bayley did the same thing against Charlotte. 2020 was totally bizarre because it was the pandemic era. So 24 hours after Asuka won it, Becky Lynch walked out and just said, oh, hey, surprise, you're actually the champion now. And when Nikki Ash got the thing in 2021, she waited 24 hours and then she cashed in on Flair. You already know the deal with 2022 because it is in your memory banks because Liv Morgan was victorious, and that's right, she found Ronda Rousey later and beat her. So whoever wins it this time, at least give them a few weeks. Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing over and over again. Gets a little bit drab. Number 2, Vince McMahon makes the right call. So if we do go through Google and do our research, it sounds like the 2 people that deserve the most credit for coming up with the Money in the Bank match are none other than Brian Gewirtz and Christopher Jericho. Do you want to know who suggested actually having the physical briefcase though? That's right. It was Vince McMahon. Now it does make sense because McMahon has always been a visual kind of a guy, but actually this prop told the audience, wow, maybe I should care about this individual because look how much they love this thing. Also, I understand the importance. After a while too, we learned to keep an eye on said superstar, because if they did run out there with the damn briefcase, it was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna happen, as we waved our hands around like Kermit the Frog. You do have to give props to Vince there. He's made the right call. Number 1, the low injury rate. But this is really interesting, because even though WWE guys go totally bonkers in these matches, when you actually go through it year to year to year to year, unless it's been kept a secret, everybody has walked away relatively unscathed. I'm not trying to pretend that they're going to be in 100% health, because my gosh do they put themselves through it, which is a reason wrestlers like John Moxley always go, I don't want to do a ladder match. That looks like it sucks. And this is a guy who will bleed within 10 seconds of the ring bell. In fact, the only time we did have an injury was in 2011 with Sin Cara. That was actually a story thing, because good old Sin had violated the wellness policy, so he was getting suspended. I want to point out that this is a very, very good thing because health and happiness is the most important thing in the world, and long may it continue. Although I always do get a little bit worried about these things because the bar keeps getting raised. I have no idea where it's gonna stop.
Let's eliminate some chambers in the Elimination Chamber. Number 10. The random order was telegraphed in the first 2 matches. Entry to the chamber is supposed to be completely at random. You know, the whole pseudo countdown flickery lights deal before the spotlight focuses on whoever's coming in next and they come in the match. But with the first 2 Elimination Chamber matches, WWE kind of ballsed it up. In 2002 and 2003, the random quote-unquote order of the 4 wrestlers who weren't starting, it turned out to be just the order that they came to the ring, which then matched exactly with the order they entered the match. WWE fortunately fixed this problem for future incarnations, and you can believe one of 2 stories here. Either A, it was basic incompetence, or B, you subscribe to the popular conspiracy theory that nobody actually told the agents the entry was supposed to be random until the 3rd match in 2005. I think both of those choices are just as funny as each other, so take your pick. Number 9. The match was originally Falls Count Anywhere, as in Falls Count Anywhere inside the structure. Originally, eliminations could take place inside the ring and on the wacky steel platform surrounding it, but in 2012, this rule was quietly changed, meaning that pinfalls and submissions had to happen between the ropes. It has made the match a little less chaotic, but a good deal safer. And besides, prior Prior to this, only 2 eliminations had ever taken place outside the ring anyway. We had The Undertaker whacking Finlay in 2007 and CM Punk getting smoked by John Cena in 2011. Number 8. It's all about the game. Triple H holds the record for the most wins in Elimination Chamber, coming in with a total of 4. Now, to be fair, these came at a time when Triple H was one of the most strongest pushed people in the entire company. A bunch of them went down during the infamous Reign of Terror and then in the late 2000s. 2003, 2005, 2008, and 2009 all saw Triple H triumph, which is perhaps not all that surprising given that Triple H has another connection to the chamber that we'll cover a little bit later on. There is, however, another chamber record that Triple H couldn't get his hands on, and it's held by one of his biggest rivals. Number 7, Chris Jericho, Elimination Chamber MVP. With 8 apiece, Chris Jericho and Randy Orton hold the record for the most Elimination Chamber appearances, but Jericho also owns the record for most eliminations. He has taken out a total of 10 different blokes during his time in the chamber, but he's actually only won it once, in 2010. Another interesting thing that people don't often remember is that Jericho was also the first person to be thrown through the supposedly bulletproof glass. But despite not working for WWE for several years now, Jericho remains the Elimination King. Number 6. Triple H invented the Elimination Chamber. Triple H was actually the man behind the chamber gimmick in the first place. "I invented it," said Paul, and no, I'm not going to do an impression. He continued, "I drew a square cage and put 4 other squares in the corners, and I said, it's 6 guys, 2 start, and every few minutes another cage opens and 1 more guy enters the fight, and everyone fights until there's only 1 guy left." Triple H said that the Elimination Chamber ended up being twice as big and elaborate as he originally envisioned, adding that when he stood in front of it for the very first time, he didn't actually want anybody knowing it was his idea. Oh dear, but presumably his stance on this has changed given that it's 2023 and he's currently promoting it as a premium live event. Number 5. But Eric Bischoff took on-screen credit for it. Considering that Triple H decided he didn't want to be credited for the chamber the minute he stood inside of it, it's kind of funny that kayfabe lore credits former WCW chief Eric Bischoff as the man behind it. Bischoff laid out the chaotic new stipulation on screen in 2002. He was in direct competition with SmackDown general manager Stephanie McMahon at the time, and in kayfabe, he felt that the risk was worth the reward, as he put his roster's bodies on the line in the name of brand supremacy. The gimmick's comparisons to War Games were evident whether Vince McMahon wanted it or not, so it seemed believable that Bischoff wanted that match back on screen as much as Paul Levesque himself. Number 4. Mark Henry's pod broke and it ruined the match. In 2015, the Intercontinental title Elimination Chamber structure fell apart, leading to the match falling apart as well. The plexiglass on Mark Henry's pod was broken when Dolph Ziggler was thrown into it midway through the match. This meant that the world's strongest man had to jump into the match early in the contest. This led to the announcers questioning if he was even legal, and things just kind of collapsed from there. At one point, a broken door stunt saw Sheamus illogically beam with glee as he entered a little bit early himself, even though he was just about to do it anyway by normal means. Everything after that was just kind of anemic and devoid of kayfabe drama before a largely bored crowd. Their boredom was understandable. Number 3. Shayna Baszler was the first to run the field. It took 17 years before somebody finally eliminated every single other participant in an Elimination Chamber match, but that's exactly what Shayna Baszler did when she destroyed everybody and won a Raw Women's title shot in 2020. Asuka, Liv Morgan, Natalya, Ruby Riott, and Sarah Logan were all bested by the Submission Magician as she punched her ticket for WrestleMania. It appeared like a genuine attempt at heating Baszler up as a legitimate killer. Her run since then unfortunately hasn't quite panned out that way, but this was one hell of a night regardless. Number 2. It's not Elimination Chamber in Germany. Elimination Chamber has taken several forms over the years. Introduced as a stipulation in 2002, it became its own premium live event in 2010, eventually becoming the perfect WrestleMania primer positioned between the Royal Rumble and the biggest show of the year. Branding-wise, the only major change WWE has ever made to the chamber came in Germany, where the show became known as No Escape. Understandably, this was to avoid connotations with the gas chambers used during the Holocaust. After holding on to WWE's old No Way Out branding for the show in 2011 and 2012, everything switched to the new label, No Escape, in 2013, and it has stayed that way ever since. Number 1. The Undertaker wanted to kill the pyro guy in 2010. Remember that time The Undertaker was almost fried alive on pay-per-view? Well, if you don't, a pyro accident saw Taker briefly engulfed while trying to enter Elimination Chamber in 2010, leaving the dead man rooting around for water bottles to try and deal with the immense pain and discomfort he was going through. Years later, when Undertaker appeared on Broken Skull Sessions, he revealed that he wanted to kill the guy responsible. Despite all that water, every time I look down, my skin is bubbling up more and more. I'm trying my hardest to stay focused, but I'm also thinking in my head, I'm about to kill this pyro guy. Undertaker added that he'd actually spoken to the pyro guy in question a couple of weeks before, letting him know that the pyro was a little bit too close to him and he was starting to feel it. Then we got to the pay-per-view, and yeah, the pyro was definitely too close to him. It's safe to say The Undertaker was well within his right to be a little bit upset. Up next, a man you could never ever throw over the top rope. It's Simon Miller talking about the Royal Rumble.
Number 10. Vince McMahon thought it was stupid. Yep, when right-hand man Pat Patterson pitched the idea of 30 men being thrown over the top rope, Vince McMahon rolled his eyes and thought that sounded awful. During a meeting with NBC head honcho Dick Ebersol, though, McMahon needed an idea to present for a TV special, so told Pat to run with it. Vince was convinced it would be the death knell to all of this and we could move on, but no. Ebersol thought this sounded most fun, and the Royal Rumble was officially greenlit. Now, the main reason Dick liked it was due to the entrance format. He assumed viewers wouldn't change the channel if a new superstar was about to walk to the ring, and damn it, he was right. It didn't take long to get rocking and rolling either, because by 1989 it had become its own pay-per-view, and we know the rest. We've talked about it, it's the flipping best, and that rhymed. Number 9, the first Rumble had 12 entrants. Because again, this was a proof of concept, we were figuring things out. This is why while 1988 has long been seen as the official debut, the WWF did try one out on a house show with 12 wrestlers, as the one-man gang became the last man standing. There were barely any recognizable names in it either, although the Junkyard Dog did make it to the last 2, and do you know what gang got for winning? Nothing. We were literally doing it because we needed something to do. 48 hours we tried again, this time with 10 people, so clearly we didn't have a clue. Although really that just sounds to me like Pat Patterson had the last laugh. His original concept was the right call. Number 8, there were 5 other non-pay-per-view Rumbles. So we are moving away from non-televised live events now because, yeah, on 5 occasions, WWE decided to see what mileage they could get out of a Rumble and put it on free-to-air programming. Randomly, there was a tag team version on Raw in June 1998, which is a mess as 20 people only had 10 minutes. Then come January 1999, we tried again. This time it was a 10-man with another 15-person version coming on SmackDown in 2004. There was also a mini 6-man Rumble back on Raw in 2008, and in 2011 it went all weird as 7 humans entered, with Jerry Lawler winning to get a world title shot against The Miz. What? It's probably best we don't do this again, and it has been over a decade. Just save it for the big show. And no, I don't mean that guy. Number 8, WWE loves changing its rules. And long may this continue. Nothing makes me happier than the stupid rules WWE has created for the Royal Rumble. It's wrestling. Have fun with it. The best of these is this idea that even if you've been eliminated, you can still throw other people out. The reason it has become so ridiculous, though, is let's go back to 1996. Vader had been chucked over the top rope but returned to press slam Shawn Michaels to the floor when WWE officials decided, nope, it doesn't count. Sid Justice must have been losing it, however, because back in 1992, Hulk Hogan had done that to him and no one cared. Which is the same way Finlay must have felt in 2008. He got disqualified for using weapons even though we'd been told that was fair game in the Rumble. What is going on? The Macho Man Randy Savage also helped with this because, of course, in 92, he had accidentally eliminated himself when he leapt over the top rope. I think he just forgot. So it could change tomorrow, but at the moment you can't do that. But yes, I would not bet your house on that staying a rule. Number 6, an AEW star has some history. Ever since Jeff Jarrett joined AEW, he has been great. It was quite the surprise and a nice reminder, always let things play out I'm just happy he's around. It rounded off quite the mini run for Jeff, because back in 2019 he was a surprise in the Rumble, and while seemingly just there for a spot of fun, there's actually more to this. Because if we look into the dates, his last Rumble was in 1999. Meaning there was a whopping 20 years between appearances. You won't be surprised to hear that is a record, and I don't know who beats that. 2 decades? Not gonna happen. Hacksaw Jim Duggan did hold this record for a while as well at 17 years, so yeah. If it does go down, it'll be quite the surprise. Maybe Roman Reigns turns up in 2044. Number 5, John Madden was asked to commentate. For whatever reason, Vince McMahon decided the 1994 Royal Rumble needed some extra pizzazz to it, when somebody mentioned that legendary NFL commentator John Madden was between jobs. Bam. They instantly reached out to him, and as I'm sure you can figure out, he said no. John didn't think he'd be able to get the right tone across. He didn't watch that much wrestling. According to Bruce Pritchard on his podcast, McMahon really pushed for this, but when no amount of money would do the job, he settled on Ted DiBiase instead. Turned out that was an error. Because very strangely, the $1 Million Man just couldn't get it together, meaning when you do break it down, John Madden would have likely done a better job. What a world we are living in. Number 4, Mil Maracas refused to be eliminated. Which is amazing, really. That is the whole point of the match. So if you're not going to go over the top rope, you're going to win. Maybe this was Mil Maracas' hope. Either way, the legendary luchador was entered in the 1997 version along with a bunch of Mexican stars, as the WWF tried to appeal to a wider audience. I don't think anyone thought someone like Mil would come in and protect their star status, though. But he did. It would simply look terrible for him to go back home after failing, which triggered a huge back and forth. And what was the result? Well, Maracas can just go get rid of himself. This is why Mil just climbs to the top rope and throws himself to the outside onto somebody else, because we were mucking around with the rules again, and here, this said he was done. Do you want to know the best bit, though? If you do watch it now, Maracas actually climbed through the middle rope before his hurl, so technically, he is still in the thing. Justice for Mil, he was never asked back again. Number 3, the 2000 show ruined a UK relationship. I remember this. I was but a boy, but I saw it play out in real time. It was super exciting if you were living in the United Kingdom too, because WWE had struck a deal with Channel 4 to air the pay-per-views for free. I didn't have any money back then, so this ruled. It turned out life didn't agree with this, however, because man, we could not have picked a worse event to show. Now, if you don't know, the 2000 Rumble is nuts. It's not only does Mae Young get naked for some reason, the violence is off the charts. Triple H and Cactus Jack try to kill each other. Clearly, Channel 4 execs were not expecting this, so when we got to Backlash, they included a 50-minute delay so they could edit out any similar content. That's mad. It meant this relationship didn't last that long, although really, why didn't someone from Channel 4 just watch any episode of Raw? It wouldn't have taken that long to figure it out. Number 2, Maven was drunk for his big moment, or tipsy at the very least. It has stood the test of time, as Maven eliminating The Undertaker from the 2002 Royal Rumble is still a talking point today. We should probably chat more about the horrendous chair shots he then suffered from the dead man. That's a different video for a different day. As the Tough Enough winner revealed recently on his very good YouTube channel though, he walked into this after having a few drinks. Now this wasn't him being unprofessional or anything like that, and instead Maven found Taker beforehand so they could walk through it all. The rookie was also desperate to do a good job, so wanted the planned blood to flow freely. When the Phenom suggested he took an aspirin to help with that, they hit a snag. Maven was allergic. Ruh-roh. The Undertaker knew how to deal with that too, though, so he busted out some whiskey, and while he was able to smash these, clearly it was different for Maven, so yup, he walked to the ring feeling a little buzzed. In hindsight, maybe this was for the best, because yeah, man, those chair shots. Still not over them 20 years later. Number 1, Randy Orton's unwanted record. I doubt Randy Orton cares about this. The man has become one of the biggest stars in modern day WWE, earned a ton of cash, and will go into the Hall of Fame. He has smashed it. If we do go back to the 2021 Royal Rumble though, which was won by Edge, you may remember him and Randy were in there for ages. I think the official time was 58 minutes and 30 seconds. That's a long-ass run. What sort of slipped under the radar, though, is that Orton eliminated nobody. That's right. It means he is officially the person who has spent the longest time in a Rumble without throwing one guy out of there. And I know there is an asterisk as he was out of the thing for ages after a brawl with the Rated R superstar. But still, you can't argue with numbers, and you can't argue with maths. Even Edge during this time was only able to hurl out Seth Rollins, Braun Strowman, and the Viper himself, which also ain't great. He does get away with it, mind. because it was still better than Randy.
And to wrap things up with a true cult favourite, ECW One Night Stand.
While WWE's version of ECW didn't really do the promotion justice, at all, in any sense, ever, when it was first brought back, there was hope. For you see, spawning out of the success that was the rise and fall of ECW DVD, Vince McMahon realised there was still an audience who desired such a product and put the gears in motion. It's for these reasons we got the One Night Stand event in both 2005 and 2006, a time where we could appreciate what was being attempted, as opposed to a man pretending he was a zombie. And a vampire. Yeah, they were both ECW through and through. These pay-per-views felt special though, and more or less did Paul Heyman's company justice. Well, that's how it seems at first anyway. When you dig a little deeper, there's always the other side. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 things you didn't know about ECW One Night Stand. Number 10. Francine and Dawn Marie nearly had a backstage fight. Francine and Dawn Marie didn't like each other. In fact, their dislike was to such a level, a lot of it was aired in public too. Like dirty laundry. Just there, floating in the wind for all to see. Not only that, but they would each take shots at one another backstage and in interviews. So basically, if there was a chance to verbally swing at the other, that's what they'd do. This is why it wasn't the best idea when they were both booked for One Night Stand in 2005. For one, Marie thought Francine had ignored her at the event, so confronted her about it, especially because Dawn was the WWE star here, and in terms of this show, Francine was the outsider. And this is where the story starts to blur. On the one hand, you have people saying that Francine called Dawn a bitch. On the other, Francine says she was very cordial to Dawn but got grief hurled in her direction anyway. Something definitely went down, however, as word got back to Johnny Ace and Vince McMahon, who called a meeting and reminded everyone about a little word called professionalism. And then they had the meeting. Number 9. Chris Benoit vs. Dean Malenko was planned for the 2006 show. Despite being in the original ECW for only a moment, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko still found time to win the tag team championships during their tenure. No real surprise, as Benoit and Malenko, and WWE thought it would make a great callback to such days by having the two go at it at One Night Stand 2006. On top of that, make for a great tribute to the late Eddie Guerrero. This was such a lock that Malenko, who had retired in 2001, had been given plenty of time to get in ring shape. This wasn't a last minute call, like that time WCW just decided to have Sting lose to Hulk Hogan. It was smart, well thought out booking, and it didn't happen. Instead, Benoit was given time off to recover from injuries, and poor Dean never even got another opponent. Number 8. Terry Funk decided to work Hardcore Homecoming instead. Terry Funk was so synonymous with the ECW brand, it seemed more than likely he would turn up at One Night Stand 2005. It'd be like Roman Reigns not being in the Royal Rumble. It just wasn't gonna happen. That's why when he decided not to work the show and went to wrestle for Shane Douglas's Hardcore Homecoming event instead, well, it was really weird. Funk had his reasons. He believed Douglas's version was more pure, and that Vince McMahon was trying to make money off the ECW name, but seemingly, those reasons just died a year later. The hardcore legend turned up at One Night Stand 2006, probably realising that while McMahon was indeed making cash, he could also make some of that sweet dollar as well. He was right. Number 7. JBL was drunk throughout it. So apparently, JBL's approach to things he didn't like was to just get wasted. There's no surprise that John Bradshaw Layfield wasn't a fan of the original ECW and would frequently rough up wrestlers coming from that direction as and when they made it to the WWE. Which is lovely. I'm gonna beat you up because I don't like what you do. What a wonderful world. Such disdain meant someone thought it would be a great idea for JBL to be involved with ECW storylines, which in turn led to JBL getting drunk, shooting from the hip when he spoke, and of course, beating the out of the Blue Meanie. The former WWE champ was absolutely blottoed during One Night Stand, which is why on the alternative commentary for the DVD you can hear him say such gems as fat f*** with blue hair and frequently calling Mike Awesome Mike Awful, which is something a child would say on the playground. But still. Number 6. It was the Dudley Boys' last WWE match. For a while. In November 2004, the Dudleys were told to go away for a while. Vince McMahon had decided they were overexposed and some time off TV would do them the world of good. And he was right. When One Night Stand rolled around though, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The Dudleys had made their name in ECW and they hadn't been seen in a while. This just worked out all around. As it turned out though, it was also their last for 10 years in the WWE. Going against Tommy Dreamer and Sandman, Bubba Ray and Devon were released and served with papers saying they couldn't actually use the Dudley name anymore, which went down really well, as you can imagine. Thankfully, time heals all wounds and the pairing had one more run with the company, and now they're gone again. Probably forever. Number 5. The concept was RVD's idea. A few entries ago, we mentioned that Terry Funk was sad because he felt Vince McMahon was trying to use the ECW name for that glorious cash. But he wasn't. I mean, he was. Vince McMahon is a businessman, so he's not going to do something that isn't financially successful. But it's not like he was roaming around backstage demanding it happened. That role went to RVD. Going to the chairman of the board on a nearly daily basis to propose new ideas, one of the real turning points was when Rob Van Dam pointed out half the guys on the roster were former ECW alumni. Obviously negating the risk quite a lot, McMahon agreed, and the rest, as they say, is history. Somewhat sadly, despite all of RVD's hard work, he never got to be a part of the 2005 show as he was injured. This was made all the better the following year, however, when he had that awesome match against John Cena. So swings and roundabouts. Number 4. WWE wanted New Jack for it. Talk about playing with fire. In fact, playing with fire would have been easier than this given New Jack's reputation. But yes, when John Cena got pretend stabbed for an angle, the stabbee was meant to be the one and only New Jack. And then I can only imagine Vince watched a tape of New Jack and reconsidered drastically. Although that's not true, because the real reason was a legal issue in the state of New York that stopped Jack from performing. Which kinda sums it up, really. Also, don't forget that New Jack would often take liberties with his opponents, so imagine what he may have done to John Cena of all people. Just ripped Cena's arm off and then started beating him with it. That was the plan, however, and the WWE did want New Jack for the first one-night stand. But those damn police got in the way. Number 3. Eddie Guerrero was mad. We never got to see Eddie Guerrero versus Chris Benoit in an ECW ring, but One Night Stand 2005 was gonna change that. A dream match that Paul Heyman had long wanted to book, the time had finally arrived. And then Eddie got mad, and that was that. To start with, Guerrero wasn't happy that he was asked to lose, given he had recently turned heel on Rey Mysterio. He felt that it ruined his heat, or in this case, Latino heat. Then during the bout itself, fans decided they didn't give a crap and started chanting nonsense at JBL, Edge and Eric Bischoff, who were sat on the balcony. Finally, Eddie got a large cut on his nose early on, and between all of this, the man got very, very fed up. So fed up, in fact, he just phoned his performance in, which in turn wound up Chris Benoit. The two got into it afterwards backstage, and Guerrero stormed off before the show was over. Which is all quite sad, really. Eddie just wanted to do the good wrestling, and it was ruined. Ruined! For shame. Number 2. Vince McMahon wasn't confident in the idea, and didn't even think it would be a success, which does question why he allowed RVD to talk him into it. Vince didn't understand who would be interested and who this would appeal to, because all of ECW's fans were long gone. That's genuinely what he thought. They're all WWE fans now, and he had trained these people to chant ECW at WWE shows. I'm not making this up either. RVD revealed this was Vince's mindset during a 2008 interview with Pro Wrestling Insider, that McMahon thought he had duped these individuals to just randomly shout out the promotion's name because he was pulling all the strings. That is straight up strange. Number 1. Sabu was also mad. Given that Sabu was booked to take on Rey Mysterio, who was the WWE champ at the time during One Night Stand 2006, you think everything would be alright. It's a pretty good spot to be in. On top of that, the match itself was also great. Of course it was. This was Rey versus Sabu. Every ECW fan ever wanted to see that. Just made sense. What didn't was the finish. After a triple jump DDT through a table, which even sounds painful to say out loud, let alone actually take, WWE doctors ran out and stopped the match because of the carnage. The problem here is that everyone and their pet dog had seen Sabu go through much worse. In fact, we'd basically seen him die on occasion. Now it was ruled he couldn't go on because of this? No one bought that, and neither did Sabu. He was said to be furious about the idea and was happy to tell everyone and anyone about it. What else could WWE do though? You don't have Sabu lose in the Hammerstein Ballroom, and no way was he going to beat Rey for the title. They had to do the false ending. Ah well.